it's David with No Chaser, and today we're going to talk about regaining trust. Let's talk about trust, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Yeah, always good to start off with a reference that a large part of the audience will not get. But, so, trust when it comes to recovery, this is one of those things where a lot of recovery, trying to stay sober, get clean, is usually an internal battle. This is where some of the outside forces come in. A lot of people, when they are prompted to get sober, by prompted I mean their life has fallen apart, or no one just gets sober because things are fine. Usually something has happened. Usually if something's happened, it means that relationships that you have had and have been a part of have been fractured, damaged, and sometimes irreparably so. Irreparably. Why do I use words that I will not say correctly? But anyways, the problem is that you have to do this thing for you. And that is so kind of counterintuitive, especially when you're first getting sober, because there's a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. There's a big drive to make things right, to fix things, put pieces together, whether it's your significant other relationship or a relationship with your kids or your coworkers or friends or whatever kind of demographic of life that you're in and who you're surrounded by. There's just a real push to be I want to make things cool and I want to get my life back together. And, the other thing that is tricky about this is that you can control things like your attitude, the actions of what you do, how you react to things, all that good stuff, but you can't control other people. And you can't control how people will react to your journey of self-betterment. And the other thing is that, even throwing another curveball in here, is that the relationships vary. There's some relationships that you gotta repair, you gotta do something about no matter what. One that comes to mind obviously would be your children. And that can vary depending on their ages. A lot of people, the kids don't know what's going on. In a sense, a lot of people I've talked to said that the kids don't consciously know what's going on, but when they're drinking or using, they knew something was wrong because things were wrong. You talk about relationships with a significant other, whether you have children with them or whether you've been together a long time or whether this is the one or, whether it was a solid relationship, but you really want to save it. It's difficult because, like I said, it's difficult because you can't control how people will react to it. And it's a tightrope walk in the process of getting trust back in your life, because it's this tightrope walk of, the way I feel is practicing understanding and then practicing advocating for yourself. And this is, there's a lot of things that I feel when you're trying to get clean and sober, when you're trying to get better, when you're trying to create a new you, that there's some things that they're difficult to do, but they're simple. You kind of know what the path is. They're just really, really hard. And there's some things that actually have gray areas that can be confusing about how to navigate them. And, a big thing is that it's said in recovery a lot that you have to be selfish, a kind of positive sort of selfishness. And this is where it comes into advocating for yourself. If there's things to watch out for where people in your life that they want better for you, but they don't quite trust you, and you, if they're asking too much for you, you kind of want to give in and just do it because man, I've disappointed them so much. I caused so much stress in their life. I got to do whatever they want me to. But that's difficult when it's at odds of what you need to do for yourself. One just example that highlights this is there's plenty of people where they have to start going to meetings or therapy or sort of these things to get better, but they the people in their lives want them. That's a lot of what they've wanted from them all along, is them to participate. And addiction and alcoholism is so isolating, it takes you out of the picture so much that all they want you to do is be there. And so it can be kind of jarring to them when you're supposed to be getting better, but you're still absent a lot. But you're absent for what you need to do for yourself. And that can be, honestly, very difficult to kind of put your foot down on some of these things. Because again, there's that drive to fix things, and there's also just kind of the guilt. And one thing I would say, specifically that you really got to watch out for is how people are, what they're asking for you, what things are being brought up in. So many people I've known, and something I've experienced myself too, is that there's this irritation of are they going to keep bringing this up? It's this real tangle of it was the past. I know it affected you, but this is I'm trying this now. And if you just keep bringing up my past, then it's only pulling me down. But then that other part, about understanding, and this is a large part that can be a real divide in a lot of these relationships in the post, whatever you want to call it, in the recovery sort of phase of your life. That can be really difficult because some people, they want to wipe the slate clean, and that really bothers people that were affected by it. They're just kind of like, oh, well, that's great. Yeah, they just wipe the slate clean, for a year, 5 years, 10 years, however many years that there's been this unbearable stress put on me, or worry, or just frustration or anger, or all this stuff you screwed up, and the instability either financially or just emotionally, mentally, you did all this stuff to me for years, but now we're just going to wipe the slate clean? Great. That must be really convenient for you. And you got to be understanding of that feeling. Another thing too is that, especially when it comes to trust, you talk about the patience you need to practice. Because some people, it's funny, they can go either way. Usually it's the former. And the former is that they've been sober for a couple of weeks and then a couple of months, and things will kind of come up and there'll be accusations. They'll get really, really mad. Because inside in your head, it's a struggle, and you're really trying. And it's kind of this how dare they type of thing. Don't they know all I'm doing? Don't they know all I'm going through for this? And now I'm doing the right things. I'm getting accused of this. And, that understanding part is that you have to take in with the context of, again, whatever your past was or what you were doing. I'm assuming that if you're in recovery, before that, there was a lot of lying. Whether they're lies by omission or just outright lies, just lies. And you have to try to be empathetic and see it from their side of I lied for so long, one thing I think about that is kind of of all the things that can be bleak in sort of addiction and alcoholism, one thing is that in comparison to how long you may have been addicted or drinking, the recovery time is actually short compared to that. And what I mean by that is that you can repair a lot of stuff in a year, sometimes in a couple of months, even though you were stuck in this thing for, like I said, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It's relatively fast compared to, it's, a lot of people will say the things where it's you lied to me for, 10 years of my life, and now you've been sober for a couple of months, and I'm just supposed to believe you. The one good thing is that, again, it depends with some people, but if you keep consistent with what you're doing and you're living honestly and you're telling some of the really difficult things, how you're struggling, because there's always that fear if you tell them that things aren't going well, then they're going to worry about you. But if you practice that, compared to how long you're lying, it can be a pretty good turnaround. Now, here's the other part. It's just a casserole of complexity here. So great. But there's assessments you have to make in certain relationships that you have that some people will never, something was broken, a spiral fracture within them that is never going to be put back together, and the trust will never come back. And I know this one personally. I was in a long relationship, and I've touched on this before, where I kind of had these two phases of my drinking where there was just, years and years and years of just daily drinking, just dogging it, man. Just going to work, putting on my hard hat, clocking in, and just killing myself. And then there was for, the past 4 or 5 years I was mostly sober, but I'd have a month here, 3 months here, month here, almost a year and a half, month, 2 months, whatever. And the relapses would be short, but they would be just disastrous, fatalistic, suicidal, all that type of stuff. And the thing was I was really hard on my relationship. I mean, the years of daily drinking weren't great. But it was almost seemed like the years of this having success and then failing were worse. Because then when I was making progress later on, she couldn't trust that. Because it had been this almost depressive sort of deja vu of you're doing good, but I've seen this before. And this has turned out really bad before. And it was to this point where, and you talk about trust and the frustration that can occur with it, where I would get mad, after, when I hit about a year, I was things should be, pretty good. The walls should be brought down. Because that was one thing. The walls went up, and it was just, she couldn't trust any of my success anymore. She couldn't trust, even though I was changing, internally. I was becoming just not a better version of me, but a new me. Just couldn't trust that. And it came to a head where I kind of had come to the conclusion that this was just never going to be fixed. And I didn't blame her. but I had to make that realization. I couldn't keep fighting it because, there's no certain timetable on this. There's no sort of like arithmetic you can do to figure this out. It's kind of one of those things that just by experience and honesty and real reflection, you have to be like, is this actually salvable? Is this person ever going to trust me again? And the funny thing is that some people, after like 2 months of being clean or sober, they'll have that go through their head. And it's times like that where you got to have some patience. But the things that you can do to gauge whether you'll gain trust back is compromises the person will make within the turmoil they have within themselves. And what I mean by that is that even if they're still mad, they still support you. Even if it's not the way, they're not a cheerleader for you, but they acknowledge and they're observing your changes. And again, the big thing is acknowledging that. Those are signs for hope. That they are a part of this, maybe at an arm's distance because of everything that happened in the past, but they're still on board. Like one of the things is that it's kind of counterintuitive, but one of the things that should have been a red flag with my relationship was that the trust, it was kind of a superficial, not real trust, but this kind of trust was there immediately. There was no sort of period of being flustered and being like, super suspicious. It was kind of this weird thing where she wasn't mad, but she really wasn't anything. Like, there wasn't, like, high intensity of accusations and stuff like that, but there was no real acknowledgement or celebration of success. And again, I don't blame that because this pattern had gone on for so long, and it was just, like, building back up and falling back down. But it was those type of signals I was gaining where it was, this person may not be really mad or really pessimistic about me, but they're also not really on board either. And, I don't know. This is just based a lot on my experience, but that was one thing I picked up that was like, it gave me, whether I could consciously like spell it out or not, it gave me this kind of internal like, ooh, I don't know if this ship is ever going to be turned around. And when you talk about trust, the relationships will vary about what you need. And this is where, again, this sort of honest reflection and assessment has to be made where there could be people in your life, kind of sometimes ancillary, like siblings or parents or really close friends, and they can all, vary about their significance to you, but you have to kind of make these calls where, over time you have to really grasp of like, are they, it's not this with me or against me, but do they accept this new person that I am? And this could be especially difficult, like a lot of alcoholics and addicts have, where they have family members and stuff that kind of struggle with the same thing. And it's important to not take it personally, but maybe they don't want to be in your life because your betterment is just a reflection of their current suffering. And, there would be a lot of people that, sometimes they're mistrustful of you because they kind of want to be, because it's kind of this misery love company sort of deal. I mean, there's a bunch of variations of how your relationships can turn once you're really, really trying to get better. And again, one of the biggest things is practicing that juggling act of like understanding their point of view, understanding as much as you can what their experience was, and not getting too, I'm guilty of this myself, but like not jumping to this kind of this anger or this feeling of betrayal of like, how can you not, trust me as quickly as I want it? And then also, though, the other half of advocating for yourself. Because there comes a certain point, too, where you kind of just have to, like throw your hands up, and at a certain point, if a person is just like, they're digging in, or like, no, you need to do more, or like, I'm not seeing the change, or I don't like what you have to do, like this is not the me, or this is not the you, rather, that I expected to come from this. And, they're kind of like these roadblocks or this friction in what you need to do for yourself. If you know you're on the right path and you have this friction, sometimes you got to lay down a sort of pseudo-ultimatum of, what do you want me to do? Like, really advocate for yourself at a point where you just go, like, these are things I need to do. And if you're not on board with this, I don't know what to tell you. Because the reality is if I don't do these things, I will just go back to this addicted and drinking version of me that I know for sure you won't like. Because this is what, you were on board with me getting better, and it may be tough, but these are the things I have to do to get better. And this is where it comes in, this autonomy of wanting to get clean or sober for yourself. Because sometimes you have to be ready for the relationship to dissolve or to put it on hold. And like, kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't know if it'll ever be repaired, but I have to be okay with that because I have to do the things that I have to do on my own. And like one of the biggest things I would just say from my experience is that, again, it's more about seeing progress in the relationship as far as trust is concerned, rather than just having a timetable. Like I mentioned just not too long ago, like after a year, I thought that things would be all fixed up. It was silly to put like a year on that. I mean, it's just really, it's kind of an arbitrary number in a sense. Like I've seen more progress in myself, not just in an amount of time or days or months or stuff, but like getting through hard times and not drinking. That means more than me than like a certain amount of days. And, it's using not having timetables, not being like this person needs to be totally on board with me and have the slate wiped cleaned after X amount of time. It's about seeing progress. And again, just kind of, this goes the same thing with like making amends to the people or like, really living sort of like apologies or making things better, where it's just kind of like living the right way. Like that's kind of the best you can do. And that goes back to, what I was talking about as far as like when you just say the ultimatum of like, these are the things I need to do. If you're not on board with that, I mean, I could say that we could have a conversation, but it almost stops here. And that's one thing where, again, you have to be honest with yourself. If you know that this is what you have to do, then you can be confident in saying that. And again, it can be difficult if you're talking about being in a marriage, being with your kids, just someone not understanding. Like one thing I will say too is that, and this is probably not the greatest sort of mindset, but a lot of people will say like, maybe they can get educated on this type of stuff. Maybe they can go to things like Al-Anon or Narcanon or whatever. Basically kind of the support groups for people that have to live with alcoholics and addicts or have, and I'm not going to lie, I really didn't want to ask people of that. There's not many people in my life, but, the significant other, some people in my family, I didn't want to ask them of anything. Like, I was like, oh, God, they had to put up with me and my self-destruction for so long. Now to, like, ask them to do something, to ask them to do, like, homework or something. No, I'm not doing that. And I still struggle with some of those things, but I know that ultimately you have to break it down to really advocating for yourself. And this all comes back to like one sort of core thing where it's just like, you have to believe you deserve a better life. So that's where a lot of like the sort of conviction for your like advocation of yourself can come from. Where, if people are needlessly, and that's the biggest thing, if they're needlessly like being distrustful or accusatory or kind of putting you down, and it's not just based on a flare of emotions or anything. If it's just a constant pattern, you got to be able to be like, you know what? I know I did awful things, but I'm trying to better myself, and this is not helpful. You don't have to be my servant or help me, like, walk me through all this stuff, but I can't deal with this needless sort of stress if I'm trying to get better. And even saying that can sound completely, like, selfish because, again, that understanding part of, like, these people have been through so much and have stood by you or stood by you as long as they could, how could you ask them of anything? But at a certain point, if they're important and then they're in your life and they're going to play a role just in your life, not at your recovery, but just in your life, you have to try to have them understand that as well too. And these conversations can be very difficult. Hopefully the thing is you can just live better, improve within yourself, and that will be good enough. And a lot of times that is good enough. Just making those changes, people notice that, and that's all they really wanted from you. And that can build trust. They can repair things. But if there is, there's sort of these like intersections of I need you to live this way, and it goes against what you need to do, you have to rethink, how. You have to. Well, I was even going to say you have to rethink what you're going to do, but no. If it goes against what you need to do to stay clean and sober, tough decisions will be made. Very fun way to end this. And I don't know if you got anything out of that. It's just kind of like ideas. Like I say, I really try to just not just give like straight advice. Like I'm this wise person who knows everything. I don't even know enough for myself. But just things I know that comes up because I know just a lot of people really struggle with like, Jesus, are they ever going to believe me again? Or am I ever going to be all right? Or like, God forbid, I'm just like 10 minutes late when I get home and then I just have this like interrogation. That may happen. And again, you have to have some patience and understand what they went through. But progress. knowing that if I get through these, and I wasn't lying, and I wasn't doing anything sneaky or anything bad or any sort of like bad behaviors or habits starting back up again, hopefully that will subside. And if it doesn't, again, that's where conversations need to be had. Very fun conversations. Anyway, I hope you got something out of that. I hope you guys are doing well on your path, or if you're watching this and you're still in the thick of it, opening your mind to a possibility of change, or even if it's a real struggle, I hope you just have an easy day. I hope you're just doing all right. Anybody out there watching, be well.